My name is Ray Morgan. I'm 45 years old, a former Marine Corps captain, and I spent the last 22 years serving my country in places where logistics could mean the difference between life and death. I've stood in forward operating bases across Afghanistan, coordinated supply drops under pressure, and made sure no unit I worked with ever ran dry on the field. After I retired from active duty, I didn't hang up my discipline or my attention to detail. I brought them with me into civilian life, into a different kind of battlefield. Now, I work as an operations advisor at a private logistics firm in Houston, Texas. It's quieter than the military, sure, but the stakes are still high. When you've seen what happens when supply chains break down in combat zones, you don't look at shipping manifests the same way again. I've built systems that don't just run fast, they run right. And while I don't wear a uniform anymore, I still carry the mindset that lives depend on the work we do, because sometimes they still do. I wasn't looking to be a hero in the civilian world. I was just doing what I've always done, keeping things moving, solving problems before they become emergencies, and respecting the people behind the numbers. But I learned real quick that not everyone values experience the same way. In the military, respect is earned. In business, sometimes it's just assumed. That's how I found myself in a room full of suits who thought logistics was just data on a screen, not the result of decades of blood, sweat, and hard lessons. I didn't say anything then, but this is the story of why I had to walk away and what happened when everything they built without me started to fall apart. He walked in like he owned the building, even though he'd only been with the company for maybe 6 hours. Evan Brock, 30-something, sharp suit, expensive haircut, and that brand of confidence you only ever see in guys who've never had to clean up their own mistakes. He didn't introduce himself to anyone on my floor, just strutted past rows of people who'd been holding this operation together since before he finished grad school. They called us into the main conference room at 9 sharp. Evan was late. When he finally showed up, he didn't carry notes or even a laptop, just a sleek tablet he never looked at and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The first thing he said was something about transformational agility and disruptive supply ecosystems. I've heard more sense from lieutenants 2 weeks into boot camp. The man talked for 20 minutes straight and didn't say a single thing I could act on. Not one mention of vendor relationships, customs protocols, or the freight delays that were actually hurting us. He just threw out buzzwords like he was auditioning for a TED Talk no one asked for. Half the room looked confused. The other half looked like they were trying not to laugh. I stood at the back, arms crossed, trying to keep my face neutral. It wasn't easy. There's a certain kind of pain that comes from watching someone butcher your field with a smile on their face. And Evan, he smiled a lot. He called our logistics model ancient and said he planned to digitize the entire compliance workflow by Q3. That's great. Except he couldn't tell the difference between a shipping invoice and a certificate of origin. After the meeting, he made his rounds, shook hands with department heads, threw in a few rehearsed compliments, and then stopped at my desk. He looked at my wall of operational maps and vendor matrices like he was staring at alien code. Said something about streamlining complexity through automation. I just nodded. No point correcting him. He'd already decided what he thought of me. From that moment on, I could feel it. The shift, like the air got thinner, like I'd gone from being the guy people turned to for answers to just another part of the furniture. He didn't ask me a single question about international routing, port clearance delays, or audit risks. He asked about KPIs and dashboard reporting cycles. That told me everything I needed to know. What Evan saw when he looked at me wasn't 22 years of operational precision. He saw someone outdated, replaceable. He didn't see the guy who once rerouted a humanitarian shipment through 2 war zones in 48 hours. He just saw someone who didn't talk like a pitch deck. It wasn't just me he brushed off. Anyone who wasn't fluent in startup lingo got sidelined. Our admin lead, Sharon, who'd held that office together through 3 hurricanes, she got moved under some 25-year-old consultant with a LinkedIn full of buzzwords and no real-world hours. I watched it happen like a slow leak in a pressurized room. Everyone still showed up, still filed reports, but the trust was bleeding out. There's a kind of quiet you learn to recognize. It's the sound of a team no longer being heard. Evan didn't hear us. He just waited for his turn to speak. And when he did, it was always about vision, not reality. Strategy, not process. He wasn't building a team. He was building a brand. The worst part, he believed it. He believed his own slogans more than he believed the people living the day-to-day grind. And I could already tell. This wasn't going to end in progress. It was going to end in collapse. And when it did, he'd never even see it coming. But I would. I always do. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, rolling a carry-on suitcase like she was just passing through Lindsay Park. Civilian strategist, AI logistics expert, not a day of field experience on her resume. She introduced herself to the floor like she was giving a tech demo, not stepping into an operations team built on sweat, risk, and repetition. Evan brought her in as part of his modernization initiative. She was supposed to streamline compliance, optimize freight velocity, and apply predictive analytics to global routing. What that meant in practice was tearing out every protocol I'd put in place and replacing it with software that had never handled a real border delay. She said my models were redundant, said they didn't scale. She never asked where they came from, never asked why I'd built them the way I did. Those charts, those contingency flows, they came from real missions, from ports that shut down without warning, from fuel shortages, embargo zones, and last-minute route shifts under fire. But to her, it was just inefficiency waiting to be solved. In the first leadership sync she joined, she smiled through a deck of colorful graphs and said we needed to move beyond manual bias. I sat there, silent, while she called my logistics model a bottleneck. She said the future was frictionless, that our job wasn't to react but to predict. Then she turned to me and said maybe it was time we updated the playbook. I didn't respond, not out loud, but I watched her closely, watched the way she ignored feedback, dismissed risk factors, glossed over the fine print in our international contracts. She talked like software could solve everything, like human error was the only variable that mattered. What she didn't know and what she never asked to learn was that sometimes error isn't human. It's systemic, and systems break when you stop listening to the people who've lived inside them. Every week, she stripped away more. The vendor call protocols I'd built to handle language gaps? Gone. The alternate port database for emergency reroutes? Replaced with a decision tree that couldn't even account for holidays. Lindsay saw complexity as a flaw. I saw it as reality. There's no button that replaces experience, no shortcut through nuance. During one meeting, she laughed off my suggestion that we hold manual reviews on customs paperwork for high-risk regions. Said the AI model already flagged anomalies. I asked her what anomaly looked like in Colombian tax codes during election season. She blinked, then changed the subject. The team didn't say much. Most were younger, caught between staying polite and staying employed. But I saw the way they looked at her, the unease behind their eyes, the way they stopped bringing up edge cases, the way they stopped asking for judgment calls. Lindsay had made it clear. Judgment was obsolete. I kept my head down, but I remembered everything. Every shortcut she took, every warning she skipped, every time she used efficiency as an excuse to ignore experience. I didn't push back. Not yet. I've learned when to speak and when to observe. And what I saw coming wasn't innovation. It was collapse, wrapped in buzzwords and blind confidence. The kind you can't stop once it starts. But you can stand clear and watch. I didn't slam my laptop shut. I didn't make a scene or call a meeting. I just saved my files, closed the folder, and stood up. Quiet, steady. The room kept humming around me like nothing had changed, but for me, everything had. I walked down the hallway like I'd done 100 times before, past the ops room, past the glass-walled conference spaces, past the screen that still displayed Lindsay's optimization dashboard like gospel. No one looked up. No one stopped me. I reached the front desk, took off my badge, and laid it down gently beside the inbox tray. The receptionist blinked but didn't speak. Outside, the air hit different. Crisper. Cleaner. I stood for a second just breathing it in. No noise. No dashboards. No half-baked metrics trying to replace muscle memory. Just sky, wind, and the kind of silence that lets you think straight. I've seen this kind of thing before. In Kandahar, in Helmand, leaders who chased metrics over instinct, who trusted software over the sergeants on the ground. It always ends the same. Delays turn into disruptions. Missteps become broken links. And by the time the brass realizes what's happened, it's too late to stop the bleed. You can't run logistics with AI alone. Real-world terrain doesn't follow algorithms. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. Anyone paying attention already knew. The system was creaking. The people who actually understood it were being pushed out. And all that was left behind was a false sense of control. As I walked across the lot to my truck, I didn't look back. There was no reason to. The fall was already in motion. They just hadn't seen it yet. But they would. They always do. Monday morning started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that fills a room when something important goes wrong and no one knows why. Emails weren't coming in from Colombia. Containers scheduled for early customs clearance were sitting idle at port. The automated dashboard showed green, but the phones wouldn't stop ringing. By mid-morning, the numbers hit. 4 containers. Stuck. Legal flag translation errors in the contract addendum sent to Bogota. The AI tool had misinterpreted liability clauses, shifting payment timelines and delivery terms. Their partner refused to sign. Without a valid document, customs wouldn't process the release. Time was burning. So was money. The total loss estimate crossed 1.7 million by noon. Frozen cargo, rerouting penalties, spoilage risks. And more than that, the trust was gone. That Colombian partner had worked with us for 8 years. Ray built that relationship himself, knew their lead by name, knew their politics, their peak seasons, even their family holidays. Now it was radio silence. Evan held an emergency sink in the main boardroom. His tie was loose, his face pale. Lindsay came in late, carrying a tablet she didn't look at. She started talking about server logs and model confidence scores, but no one in the room understood what she meant. Someone asked if we had a human fallback plan. She blinked, then admitted we didn't. By then, it was too late. Bogota had pulled their team off the call. No signature, no shipment. Operations froze half a dozen linked orders until the issue cleared. But it wouldn't clear. The wording error had breached contract terms. That meant weeks of legal review, dozens of man-hours, and a partnership hanging by a thread. Evan looked around like he expected someone to step in. But there was no Ray this time. No one to make the call. No one to talk to Colombia in their own language and diffuse the crisis. The room stayed quiet, filled only with the hum of panic and the sharp tap of Lindsay's nails on her screen. The domino had tipped, and it was just the beginning. By Thursday, the cracks had turned into fractures. A major shipment bound for Sao Paulo was frozen in transit. Customs flagged it for a tax classification error. The AI had assigned the wrong code, pushing the cargo into a restricted import category. That triggered a legal review. The kind that doesn't move fast, especially not in Brazil. Lindsay tried to fix it on the fly. She downloaded the original contract, ran it through Google Translate, and made edits herself. No legal review, no native speaker, no verification. What she sent back wasn't a correction. It was a disaster. One clause now granted the vendor unrestricted scheduling rights. Another shifted penalties for delays entirely to our side. By the time legal caught it, the damage was done. Our Brazilian partner pulled out, citing breach of trust and operational incompetence. Their final email was brutal. No negotiations. No room to fix it. Just a hard exit and a reminder that trust once broken doesn't come back. The goods? Still sitting in port. Perishable. Delicate. Worth $6.4 million. Evan called another emergency meeting. This time, even the finance team showed up. No one had answers. Lindsay tried to explain. Said the translation error was minimal. Said the model would learn. The CFO slammed his laptop, shut halfway through her sentence and left the room. Every line on the dashboard was blinking. Every channel in operations was flooded. We weren't just losing shipments. We were bleeding money. Fast. But worse, we were losing face. These weren't random vendors. These were legacy relationships, built on years of hard-earned trust and cultural fluency. And now they were unraveling because someone thought software could replace situational awareness. That legal nuance could be automated. That experience was optional. People were whispering. Staff started updating resumes in the background. The air inside the office had shifted. Heavier, sharper, like a storm about to crack the windows. But it wasn't weather. It was consequence. And it was only getting louder. The call came on a Friday, just after lunch. I was sitting on my porch, the Texas heat rolling off the sidewalk, coffee still warm in my hand. My phone buzzed with a number I half expected but hoped I wouldn't see again. The voice on the other end was from HR. Polite, rehearsed, the kind that tiptoes around desperation. She said they'd like to discuss a possible return. She said they valued my expertise. Said the leadership team had realized there were gaps. I let her talk, let the silence stretch between each carefully chosen word. Then I asked, calm and direct. As Lindsay apologized, there was a pause, a long one. She fumbled, said there hadn't been time to reach out to her directly, that they were still assessing the situation, that legal was reviewing everything. I waited until she finished. Then I said it clearly, without anger, without heat. I don't fix fires set by arrogance. She tried to soften the tone. Said they were working on rebuilding trust. Said the company was going through a transition. I cut her off. Told her I wasn't interested in band-aids or smoke signals. That when a company lets ego outrank experience, they earn the fallout that follows. There was a long exhale on the line. Like she realized the conversation had already ended before it began. She asked if there was anything they could offer to reconsider. I looked out over the driveway, watched the wind shift through the trees. No, I said. Some lessons don't come with a second try. She said she understood. But I don't think she did. I don't think any of them did. Not until now. Not until the contracts failed. And the partners vanished. And the trust that took decades to build evaporated in days. I hung up without saying goodbye. Sat back in the chair. Let the quiet wrap around me. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. They finally saw my worth. But I wasn't waiting to be seen anymore. The offer came from someone who understood the trenches. A fellow Marine who'd built a logistics firm from the ground up. He didn't send a recruiter. He called me himself. Said he didn't need someone to polish dashboards. He needed someone who'd led convoys through mountains at midnight. Someone who understood what it meant when a single delay put lives, not just timelines, at risk. They brought me in as director of strategy. No fancy speeches, no buzzwords. Just a quiet handshake and a direct question. Can you help us do this right? I said yes. Not because I needed a title, but because I saw the blueprint for something real. I built my team from the same cloth. Veterans, field-tested logisticians, operators who'd coordinated supply routes under gunfire, people who didn't chase the limelight. They chased clarity, integrity, outcomes. We didn't hire for charm. We hired for character. And it showed. Our office sits in a modest building outside Dallas. No glass towers. No digital waterfalls in the lobby. Just honest space. Steel desks. Quiet focus. Big whiteboards with bigger ideas. Phones that ring with real urgency. Laughter in the break room from people who've earned every line on their face. We don't roll out new tech for show. We test it under pressure. We don't pitch synergy. We build systems that hold up when the storm hits. My team knows that a good plan doesn't just look good. It works when everything goes wrong. Vendors call us because we listen. Clients stay because we deliver not perfectly, but predictably. Respect isn't a slogan here. It's a standard. I walk the floor every morning. Same boots I wore in Iraq. Same mindset. Lead by example. Speak less. Mean more. Know your people. Trust their grit. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss proving my worth to people who never understood it. This place saw me before the resume. That's the kind of leadership you don't walk away from. They chased efficiency. I chose effectiveness. And that made all the difference.